G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we're coming at you with another episode of the Community Catch-Up, and this time we've got our coach for his first appearance on the podcast, DC. We're going to pick his brain about all the Eagles, the opening round games, and also some hot topics. Let's go!
Just done it from nowhere. Lifted the goal from inside the 30. Seed from the boundary. Dusty. Petrarca. The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy, and joined as always by Coach of the Mighty Oxlongs, Luke Rogerson. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. I'm particularly excited for this episode, actually, because my mind's been racing about that West Coast backline, and I think we've got a guest that might be able to clarify a few things for us. Should we get him on the screen?
We should get him on the screen, and it always is nice to bring some guests on with some actual credentials, and maybe we shouldn't do it too often because people stop listening to us and
correct.
Unpracticed and unapplied.
Welcome to the show, DC. How are you, mate?
DC from Hatchat.
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure.
Always good to have some new faces on. So for those of you who don't know, DC is the captain, as he's recently been crowned, of the Hat Chat boys, who are one of the many good quality content creators out there. So just straight off the top of the show, if you guys haven't already, go and check out Hat Chat. They do some really, really good stuff over there. DC, we're going to get you on. I don't know if you've watched the Bales episode, probably only for at least a few hours ago, so maybe not. But today we're going to be picking your brain on a bunch of different topics, and in particular, we like to start with a bit of a conversation about the team that you support, and unfortunately you have the misfortune of supporting the West Coast Eagles. Before we get into any questions, how's that been for the last few years?
It's not been great, to be honest. Yeah, definitely the worst couple of years in history to be an Eagles supporter. I guess we've still got the 2018 flag there, which feels as recent enough for us to be able to still be riding on the coattails of that. But last year in particular was rough, to say the least.
Mate, nothing wrong with hanging on to past premierships, mate. We're going to be riding the Tigers ones to death, mate, to death. Now, like I said before, I'm particularly interested to talk about this backline, because I said to Mitch before recording, I was actually pretty dismissive, I think, of the West Coast backline early on, and then as I started to listen to more and more content, I thought maybe that was the wrong reaction to have. So how do you see the West Coast backline sort of shaping up, and do you think that there's going to be any beneficiaries from the Shannon Hurn retirement?
I think there must be. He was obviously controlled a lot of ball leaving that D50. So someone is going to have to take up some of that slack. I guess the first thing I'd say off the top is that the Eagles were second last for fantasy points last year. So we're talking about a relatively small pie. That we're talking about a certain player maybe getting a slice of that, but it's a small pie. Yeah. So I think there's obviously a few obvious candidates, and they've probably been spoken about. And that's going to be Alex Witherden and Liam Duggan are the two. Brady Hoff has popped up in a few pods here and there. He's probably not the one for me. I still think he's a little bit too young to take on a lot of that key distributor responsibility. Yep. I think they also like what he does from a defensive point of view. So, yeah, I think those two guys probably will take a bit of a bump, or have the potential to take a bit of a bump. Did you want me to start with Witherden?
Yeah, do you see, I think the interesting thing for me is we've heard a little bit of talk about Duggan and whether he gets into the midfield a little bit more. So my leaning was towards Witherden, but how do you see that? Do you think it's Witherden, or do you think that Duggan midfield thing holds any water, or what do you think around that?
Yeah, I think in some ways Duggan is probably more similar to Hurn in the way he plays. Okay. Because Hurn obviously was a great kick. It was a long kick. He got a lot of kickouts. I can see Witherden getting parts of that, where he's probably going to get quite a few kickouts. He'll be a distributor, but I don't think he's the leader and the general in the backline there at all. And that's really the role that Hurn played. He would sort of direct traffic, and then the ball would funnel back through him a lot. I think that's probably suits Duggan's game a bit more. He's obviously the captain now as well, so. Yeah, I can see Witherden getting a bit of a bump, but he's not going to just replace Hurn. I think that that responsibility is probably going to be spread across those two guys and maybe a few others as well.
So you would say that, like, you reckon the coach dug him in that role? He that was terrible. No, it was
sorry you had to see that. We might actually have to stop recording.
No, we'll push through. We'll push through.
Just like DC's Eagles doing that Homer Simpson meme, just fading off into the background.
I'm so used to Luke making the jokes. I'm not sure what's going on here.
I didn't give permission to do that.
Throw the spanner. Keep you guessing. But so in terms of Alex Witherden, if we cross back over to him for a second, sometimes people ask the question, like, is he locked into their best 22? Because he has had patches where he's been in and out of the side. And going back a couple of seasons ago when he was in the Lions, his AFL fantasy, I guess, pedigree was always, pretty up there. But his question was, okay, how much does he actually help the team? And what do you think about Witherden this season? Is he someone that we can sort of feel confident he's going to be there week to week? Or is it still a question mark for him as someone that... if you are thinking about selecting him, you've got to take into account?
No, I think for me, the talk of him not being best 22 has kind of been a bit overblown.
I agree.
He played every game last year, I think, from memory, or might have missed one. He's also in an age bracket that the Eagles really lack in that sort of mid-20s group. Yep. We've got a lot of young players and we've got a lot of senior players, but are lacking those guys that are in their prime or coming into their prime. So I think for that reason, partly he will play. And he definitely wasn't our worst last year.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of guys that really had shocking years. I don't think he was necessarily one of them. It was probably his best year in some ways for the Eagles. So, I wouldn't be stressed about him being dropped unless his form really declines.
That's good to hear, because I had the same kind of thoughts when I watched, and I had the misfortune of watching some Eagles games last year. And, I thought he'd improved. I thought there was better signs of the other things, like the defensive things.
Well, the other thing that you mentioned
roles
previously, I think, which is good, is that game to game, depending on who was missing, he showed that ability to play the team role.
He was guarding Buddy Hield.
Guarding, mate. That's NBA.
He was matching up on Buddy Franklin at one point, I believe.
Good luck to him. Now, DC, there's one more bloke that I want to pick your brain about, because I find myself slowly talking myself into potentially looking at this guy. Talk me out of it. What's Elliot Yeo's go? What's his go?
I'm not going to talk you out of it, because he's been in my team for a few weeks now.
Oh, no. Okay, that's going to be enough. That's going to tip me over the edge. I'm in.
Yeah, I just think if he manages to get through the full preseason, starts round one in the guts, he's got the potential. If he doesn't get injured, he's got the potential to be a top 6 defender. Let's
100%.
not beat around the bush here. Like, he's done it before. The only reason that he's not 30-40% owned is because of his injury history. So if he can overcome that, and it sounds though he's had an excellent preseason, he came back to the club early. We just need a bit of luck from him, I think, because the role sounds like it's going to be there. I think they need him in the midfield, where they got belted, obviously, around the ball last year. So he's tough. He works defensively really hard as well. So
if I look at the highest averaging players for the West Coast last season, Tim Kelly averaged 98.7, Liam Duggan averaged 96. Then the next highest was Dom Sheed at 89.6. So is it like, for him to be a top 6 defender, he'd have to be in their top 2 or 3 scorers? Is that something that we are like thinking that he can do? Because I don't know, I have a little bit of a tough time predicting that. Yeah, I mean, but Tim Kelly, who's, I would argue, I mean, your thoughts, DC, but like, is he in the same sort of area as Tim Kelly as a player in terms of a fantasy scoring ability?
Yeah, I would probably say Yeo at his peak 5 years ago was better than that. I think he had 107 averaging season or something. So he was a legit Uber premium for us. And I think 1 or 2 seasons there was a clear top 6 defender. So he's done it before. It's obviously a fair while ago now.
Yeah.
In the middle of the season last year, he did have that 4-game run where quite a few people actually brought him in. He went 84, 94, 95, 98 in 4 games in a row playing midfield. So that's the sort of scoring I would expect if he's able to stay fit and play that role. I would think he can average over 90, which would be obviously an excellent pick from a price at 70.
Mate, I reckon you got me on the hook, but we'll give you a reprieve. We'll stop talking Eagles, and our next little segment that we want to have a bit of a chat about is what we're calling unconventional takes. So this might be something that perhaps you've been hearing a lot of talk about a particular player in the fantasy community, and you might have a slightly different view to what you think the consensus view is for this particular segment.
Yeah, who's the guy that you sort of are disagreeing with the sentiment out there in the AFL fantasy community, or maybe it's for positive, maybe it's for negative, or anything out there that you've got a slightly different view on?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I think a lot of them are actually those early buy players. Like I've heard on multiple podcasts around people being surprised at the ownership of some of the players with the early buy. One that stands out to me, I think, is Kadeem Coleman. Yep. I'm not really that bullish on him at all. I think it's kind of weird. The grand final last year is almost like the new preseason hype. It's like
we love that one data point.
Grand final hype.
It's a single data point. Everyone loves it.
Yeah. So I think for a few reasons, I think his time on ground is pretty low. The Brisbane game style, I don't think really suits high scoring in the back line. Yeah. They're not going to have a lot of ball down there because they're a high scoring team. Yeah. He's been a little bit injury prone, if that's going to come into it as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why, and he's also not that cheap as well.
No.
He's priced at about 70. I think
he's not a Zach Williams price. If you're comparing those two players that have the early buys, Zach Williams is $200K cheaper. So the expectations need to be $200K higher. So
I can't see him averaging too much more than low 80s, which I think is a bit of a nothing pick at his price, because you're still probably then 10 to 15 points away from the top defenders. And I think Yeo's similar price. I'd take Yeo every day of the week just because of the role and the fact that we've seen it from him before, albeit a while ago.
Yeah, they're all good points you make. And when you actually go back and dig into his scoring from last year, you're looking at a guy that I think from memory only went 90 plus maybe 3 times, and you'd effectively need him to average that to be a good pick. So I think you might be on the money there. We'd be staying away from Kitty Coleman.
Is there anyone else that you've got a differing view to some of the other, content out there, or other popular perceptions or anything like that?
There's no one that really jumps out. I mean, Daicos, I think, is going to be a pretty divisive one as well. I definitely won't start him.
We'll test that in a second.
Can I quote an article for you that I read? This is all I've seen. Yeah. This is the article that I read about Nick Daicos a couple of days ago. It says that he's battling groin concerns, and the article says...
is it groin stiffness? Because we don't like groin stiffness.
It says here, and I quote, he ended up on his back and touching his groin area.
Oh, no!
So
please.
I'm not sure what they're doing down there at the Pies, but I wouldn't be late.
He's gone too far.
I think they have, to be honest. That's
wait till you get home, Nick.
That's more of a Friday night operation than at trading in front of everyone. So they've even got a photo here. It's sickening, really.
Okay. Yeah,
So I don't mind that. Let's stay away from Nick Daicos for more than one reason.
I reckon he'd fit nice and over at the Oxlongs over there. I think
he may do. We're a bunch of sickos.
All right, let's move on now to this next topic, which we are going to be talking about some of the hottest topics in the preseason game and what they could mean for our fantasy sides.
Hansel, so hot right now. Hansel.
You know what is so hot right now? The forward line. The forward line is so hot right now, or at least talking about the forward line, because there is a lot to talk about with not many concrete answers at this stage.
DC, give me some concrete answers on the forward line. I'm crying out for them, mate.
Harley Reid.
Well, that's where we can start. Lock that one in.
End of list.
End list. What's your approach, I guess, in general when you're looking at the forward line? Is it I know some people like to have, that F1, like that's a top 6. Is there maybe a bit more room to go with a more cheap forward line full of mid prices, load up more rookies in our forward line? Or what's your general, I guess, how you're approaching the forward line this season?
Yeah, I see it as an opportunity, really, because there seems to be a lot of variance in the forward lines I've seen being thrown around at the moment. And some people are trying to go with 2 or 3 premiums and just take what's on offer. Others are going with no premiums and trying to load up on rookies. Others are going full mid-price madness and going 6 mid-prices or 5 and Reid. It's a bit all over the place. So I kind of see it could be fairly important in deciding who is going to start well in the season. So for that reason, I'm probably going to try and go with guys that I'm pretty confident can outperform their price.
Does that, just reading between the lines there, does that sound like you are fading some of those guys that are a bit more towards the top of the line, like your McRae's, Flanders, and those sort of types?
Yeah, I reckon I'll only start one of them at best at this stage, probably what you would term a true premium.
Yep.
But it could change in the preseason. I think there's also, if we're talking about guys being injured, I'm as concerned about someone like Jack McRae, who's just done a hamstring, and even Zach Fisher, as I am with Elliot Yeo, who's done a full preseason. So,
very good points.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge there still. I think the practice matches are going to be vital. We obviously need to see roles for a lot of the mid-prices to actually pick them, thinking guys like Rochelle or McDonald, Adams, Fisher if he plays. There's a whole heap, Fife, Jordan. It's just a massive list of mid-prices that people seem kind of keen on, but we haven't actually got any concrete evidence that they're going to have the roles we want.
Do you kind of something that I've been toying with recently is the concept of looking at the lines independently or looking at your team as a whole? Would you be a subscriber to the fact that you just pick the value wherever the value is, and if that means that your midfield's stacked and you find your value in the forward line, that's okay? Or do you think there's a case to be made that you really do need to look at the lines in isolation and make sure that you have some premium
Not
coverage?
too heavy,
I guess.
one and light on the other.
Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I think you've got to play the hand you're dealt, really. Yeah. And the hand we're dealt this year is that we're light on forwards. Last year, the hand we were dealt was that we had the opposite, and we were stacked with forwards, and that was a great starting move to start with five forward premiums or five guys that ended up being keepers. So this year, that's obviously not going to be the case. So I think we've got to try and be a little bit creative there, and maybe that does mean going a bit heavier in the midfield and in defence in particular, because we've obviously got value in the rucks too.
Jesus. It'd be nice if we could pick one of those rucks as a forward. That'd be very nice.
Grundy, I think Grundy was close from memory looking at the stats there.
We need his VFL percentages.
Give us the VFL where he's trained down as a forward there. Before we move on to the next hot topic, do you have any guys in particular that you are extra keen on, even if it's just like you're watching them a little bit more closely in the forward line during the preseason games? Is there any guys that you sort of got your eyes on more closely than others?
Without giving away too many secrets.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of wasn't joking with my list. It's pretty much Harley Reid is literally the only guy that hasn't left my forward line this preseason. There's one maybe that's a bit left field that we haven't really spoken about yet.
That's what we want.
And people seem to be writing off. I'm not quite sure why, and that's Caleb Daniel. So he's actually my F1 at the moment.
Can you see my scars? Can you see him through the camera?
Then,
I did. I got the heebie-jeebies when I hear his name.
Yeah, I don't know. People have seemed quite keen on McRae. Do we actually think that Caleb Daniel's any more or less likely to get mid-time than him?
At least his head will stay erect. That's the only thing. Where do you see Caleb Daniel playing? Like, what do you see his role being this year?
I hope it's a decent chunk of midfield playing off half-back and switching between those two roles. So that would be ideal. I think he'd be a good chance of being a top six forward if that was the case.
I've heard some rumours or some comments recently that Bailey Dale might be playing a little bit forward. Really? What I've heard. So I don't know if
they do have a stacked kind of half-back line.
So I don't know if that allows a bit more Caleb Daniel down the back and playing a bit more defence. I'm not too sure if that's more just an Ed Richards kind of freeing up thing. I'm not sure, but that's something that I'll be monitoring there as well.
Close. I think that's a valid point, but like you said, DC, there's just been heap of talk about McRae and virtually nothing about the mini-man.
I reckon the Ballarat game, and is it round 2 that he's got?
I think he turned up there last year, didn't he?
Did he?
I have to go check that. I've got a feeling he turned up there.
I'll have to research that because I just think 20. It's my head. So I might have to get my stats right with that one. Let's talk about the next hot topic, which is, of course, the early round buys and the new structure that we haven't dealt with before. Obviously, the price movement after the first round, but taking into account the opening round scores. What's your general approach to these early on, I guess, the first time we're going through something like this in 2024?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to what you guys have already spoken about on some of your previous episodes. I think there seems to be a reasonable amount of consensus among the content creators on this, in that you need to minimise the premiums with the early buys, particularly rounds 2 and 3. low end mid prices is probably fine, and you're trying to get them obviously for that quick cash gen after round one. And maybe, if you've got a value premium or a high-end mid-price, so 5 and 6 is okay as well. So obviously guys like Grundy in that bracket, maybe a Taylor Adams as well. There's a few, and I've had some in my team, but I am trying to minimise it.
Yeah.
Do you have a line in terms of, like, I'm looking particularly at that round 5 where we've got Sydney. We've also got, who's the other team on that bye?
I was going to say Collingwood, but Collingwood's 6.
No, Collingwood is that one.
Is
Yeah,
Collingwood.
so Daicos has got the 5. So is there a line in terms of, like, how many is too many on that one round? Because I know a lot of people might have, like, a James Jordan, a Taylor Adams, a Nick Daicos, a Grundy, all in the same team. Like, is 3 okay? Is that too many? Do you want to go 2 or less? Or what's your thought around that?
I think it depends on how many you plan to still have after that buy. So if you start a James Jordan and you think you can trade him out after 4 rounds or effectively 5 price rises, then maybe that's an okay move. And you can start with him. You might want to start with Adams, and you might want to start with a Grundy, and then even a Daicos. Maybe you could get away with 3 if you planning to trade one out. But if you're planning to keep them all post buy, I wouldn't go any more than 3 for sure.
I almost think 2. Like,
it certainly becomes that thing as well, where, like, when you start to project these, I'll trade this guy at this round. I'll trade.
Yeah,
you just know that the fantasy gods are going to.
Everyone's got plans until you're smacked in the
Four
face.
bullets the week before or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So, man, I'm sketchy at all that stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's a week is a long time in AFL fantasy, let alone 4 weeks. So, yeah. All right, let's move on to the next topic here and talking about the early buy rounds. We're going to give you some hypothetical situations here, DC. Some popular players in the first that are playing in the opening round, so they do have early buys. We're going to give you effectively a made-up score that they do in opening round, and also their role, whether it's kick-ins, CBAs, or whatever have you. So
Mitch has even gone through and bumped up a few of these numbers.
Yeah, some of them a little bit
extra
trickier.
Spicy. So we'll see how we go.
All right, let's start with the first one. So the popular man, Nick Daicos. Let's say he comes out opening round, he scores a 135. He's got 70% in the midfield, so he's effectively an inside mid only. Does this change your mind? You said before you're not going to start him, but if he comes out and scores a 135, does that budge you?
No, I don't think so, because it doesn't actually change your thinking at all. Like we always know he can score 135. It doesn't mean he's going to do it every week.
Yeah, I had to remind people last year, and you probably should remind people, you don't actually get those points. They don't get added onto his score later.
Is that not how it works?
Yeah, no, it actually legit.
So I've been playing wrong this whole time?
Yeah, no, they don't get the points that they've already
I would
scored.
have won a hat if I knew that.
You do get the cash gen this year, though. So
You do.
So we get part of it.
A little bit, but I don't think we're picking Daicos for cash gen.
You stayed strong to your convictions there, which I rate DC, even though Mitch tried to tempt you with a huge number. But I feel like I know the answer to this next one, but I'll give it to you anyway. Kitty Coleman, 95, 40% kick-ins. Are we still going no dice?
Yeah, I'm still saying no. I think the reason why I'm not keen on him is the low floor. So just because he bumps a decent score doesn't mean he can't come out the next week and drop a 60.
Couldn't agree more. Who we got next, Mitch?
Next guy is his defender, mid-price. I guess what guy that people have instead of him is a Zach Williams, a similar round 2 buy. But he comes out, he has a 78 and 0% kick-in. So he's obviously a lot cheaper. 78, is this not enough for you to start the guy who a lot of people have in their teams at the moment?
No, that would be enough because it's still close to 30 points upside on his starting price for me. And you're picking him as a quick cash gen kind of move. He's not going to be in your team long term. So I think that's fine for me to start him. Hopefully you can make a couple of 100K over the first month and then flick him on.
In that scenario,
bump that score down for the next guest.
in that scenario, would the 0% kick-ins worry you at all? Would you sort of see that as, hang on, I would expect
is he a guy that we need him to have kick-ins, or is
I don't know. It's a good question. It probably depends on who else is in the back line, doesn't it? If Doherty's playing back, then maybe that affects his role a bit. If he's up on a wing, if Newman takes 100% of the kick-ins, it might depend on who's ahead of him.
Yeah,
bit of a watch.
I imagine Saad's still there, so
Yeah,
I don't expect him to have a huge share of the kick-ins, but it would be interesting. Next guy,
we are going. Tom Green is going to give you a 135, 85% CBAs, and then he's going to go take on North Melbourne, West Coast, and then you can flick him to Sam Walsh. What do you reckon?
You make it kind of tempting just with those 2 games, but No, kind of similar answer to Daicos. Like he had 80+% CBAs last year anyway, so nothing's changed there. And he's obviously shown that he can put up big scores. So no.
You are a man of conviction, mate. I like it, but we're trying to tempt you. We're trying to reel you.
No stuttering at all from the great man. I reckon some of his next ones are a little bit more tempting, though. But Sam Walsh, he's a very popular player, and I would say that if he wasn't an early round buy player, he'd be sitting on my team right now. But he comes out in round 0 and scores a 125 on 65% CBAs. Are you tempted?
It's probably more tempting than the other two just because of the price.
Yep.
But I also think there's multiple guys priced under 100 or between 90 and 100 that I think could match him or average more than him that don't have the early buy.
So do you think it depends on what you've seen prior to that point from those players? Like, say,
potentially,
like a Jack Steele or like an LDU. Yeah. Say if they haven't looked as you wanted to in the preseason games, and then Sam Walsh does do that, and maybe that makes it more tempting.
Yeah, maybe. But I think with LDU and Steele, I would say they're pretty clearly going to be the number one midfielders at their clubs. Yeah. You can maybe debate that Crouch is there with Steele as well, but I couldn't say that about Walsh. I think there's a handful of other guys that could take a lot of that inside time away from him. Yeah. He obviously spent a lot of time last year playing off half forward and then pushing into stoppage, which is fine as a role, but might just limit his ceiling a little bit.
From memory as well, I might be absolutely butchering this, but when he did come back for a patch and Carlton were going really well...
Yeah, towards the end of the season, before finals, because he played well in finals, but at the end of the home and away, he was scoring poorly, but Carlton were playing very well.
Yeah, which is interesting. That's always something I think interesting for me when the team's playing well. That's when you want to watch these guys and... That's what they want to be doing. So
let's head over to the Rucks.
Okay, now this is a good one because I want to get a little bit of insight into your Ruck philosophy this year. Maxi Gawn comes out round 0, gives you the straight hunch, and obviously I've got 80% CBAs here, but we expect him to be that and more. So the 100, would it do it for you?
Yeah, I think so. I'd back in that role again. So yeah, less bothered about the score for him and more about the role, which we know should be solid.
Yeah, he could be the pick of the year, I reckon. Gorney.
You know what I thought about Max Gawn. I'm all in on him. Brodie Grundy, his ex-teammate, comes in against Max Gawn in opening round, and he scores a 79. He has the 80% CBA, so he's by far and away the sole and number one ruck, but scores a 79. Is that enough for you to maybe turn to a different option?
Oh, not unless we see Cherry absolutely brain it in the preseason matches. Yeah, there it is.
Yes,
there it is. Fell into my own cliche.
How many times you touched that mic, Luke?
Bagels, mate.
He's a reformed man.
Restraint.
But okay, so it depends on the Cherry.
I'd still start him. I'd still start, I think.
So if I'm reading between the lines, is your starting ruck combination at the moment Gawn Grundy, if you don't mind revealing?
It is. Yeah. Cherry's clearly the third option, I think. Yeah. But I just like the idea of Gawn potentially being there for the whole year.
Yeah, it must. I haven't played for enough years, but it must feel nice for some people to go to a Gawn Grundy combination and just reminisce on old times.
Well, there's those two, and then we're talking about Fife in the midfield. We're talking about Elliot Yeo. What year is it? 2015.
Far out. Okay, trip down memory lane.
Oh man, I like it.
Let's go to the forward line now, and Sam Flanders comes out. He has a 50% CBA role and scores you a flat 100. Are you tempted to go with this player?
And have you heard about the moist run? As well. Have we publicised that enough? Because that's blowing my mind.
I actually did the episode with Bales on Flanders and McRae, so we discussed him a bit, but no, it wouldn't be enough. The run doesn't scare me a huge amount, but we do want to see a really cushy role there. I do think maybe he overperformed a touch to finish last year. I'm not expecting him to come out and average 110 this year.
Yeah, especially. I mean, you say overperformed. Like when you're doing what he did at the end of the last year with, what was it? Was it less than 30%?
I think he had like 35% CBAs, and he did 105. I think
that's overperforming. I think you've called that one pretty well. He's a guy that I had in to start with, but the more I hear, the more research I do, the more he drifts away from the Oxlongs.
Yeah, he made his way back into my team this afternoon.
Oh, has he?
So let's go on to the last player of this opening round roulette. Taylor Adams, he comes out, he scores a 95, but he only has 50% CBAs in this game. Are you leaning on the score there, or are you looking at those 50% CBAs and thinking that's not enough?
Oh, this is probably the toughest one, I think. I've really been torn on Adams because on one hand, we're lacking forward line premium options. He might get close enough to them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think he averages something like 95 for the year. I think he's more likely to be somewhere in the 80s. If you look at Parker last year, I think he was under 90 for an average.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, I don't really see how Adams is going to do much better than that if they're playing the same game style. So, yeah, I'll probably go with the crowd on that one. If he ends up being really popular because he goes well in round 0, I'll probably go with the crowd.
Yeah, all right. Doing the Luke Rogerson, following the crowd.
Vanilla, mate.
Nothing
vanilla.
wrong with that.
Now, before we go to this next segment, can I just say we've got DC on, but at the moment he's been a marvellous guest.
Jesus Christ.
Wrote
Well
that
done.
one down. That took me all afternoon.
Your jokes remind me of my fellow hat chatter, Jake, and his seasons. Like, you know they're going to be shit, but it's still funny.
And there's the wind-up. Mitch
play it
always
anyway.
looks at me.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, fuck,
I
I
can
know
always
what's going
tell
on
when
here.
it's happening.
I had to get a bit of DC Marvel gear in there. So.
Let's talk about a couple of locks, or at least one lock. Give us one player in your team, maybe outside of the obvious picks and the McKirches and the Harley Reeds, as much as they are locks in our team. But give us someone outside of those boys that hasn't left your team all preseason.
Hayden Young, here we go.
Yeah, Hayden Young's one of them. I did a count earlier. There's actually only 4 outside of the rookies. So I had him, Grundy, Steele, and LDU.
There you go.
That bodes
There
well.
you go.
They've been getting around at Oxlong training, so that bodes well.
I've got 3 of the 4.
Beautiful.
Just demonstrates that the preseason goes way too long because I've spent way too long just fiddling around with my team.
It's like a cloud car, just everyone's just out.
Everyone's out, everyone's in. Yeah, no, that's good. That's strong, though. I do think a lot of those options are very, very good, and I think... yeah, they've definitely all spent time in my team.
I haven't asked, just out of interest, I haven't asked you this question. Is there anyone that DC didn't mention that has not left your team? Butters,
Who has not left my team? Zach Butters has not left my team.
Okay.
He's probably been in mine for 90% of it already. as
Yeah,
well.
probably that one. I've had... Tom Stewart's been there for a lot, but he sometimes I have a look at other different things. So maybe Heath Chapman. Heath Chapman's also sat there. But I'm not locked into it. It just kind of fits a nice price point, but I'll have to wait and see. What about just someone that you're watching extra closely in preseason matches, opening rounds, whatever it may be, just or a team even, a midfield rotation? Is there something that you've got your eye on in particular?
I think it's a lot of those forward guys that we spoke about earlier. I think that's where the season could be won and lost, to be honest, is if you can nail forward picks or if there is any forward picks to nail. In terms of, I wrote down which teams I'm most interested in, mainly to look at the midfield mix. I've gone with Adelaide. I think, is it going to be Rochelle or Crouch? Does it affect Dawson? Is the other one. Hawthorn, obviously day out. Can Newcombe take another step? Does McDonald or Ward take a bump on McKenzie? Bulldogs, is McRae in there? Is Caleb Daniel in there? Is Bont still doing the same things? Like there's quite a few questions there. Freo, how are they going to fit Fife in? Sounds as though Matt Johnson's had a really good preseason as well. There's a few more mouths in there potentially this year. Hayden Young obviously moving in full time. Then obviously Sydney with Adams going there, Grundy going there. What do they look like? Again, a lot of mouths to feed. And last one would be Port, who's the number 1 ruck there. Does Ollie Wines actually get more midfield time? What does that do to Butters and Rosie? So I think they're the teams to me that are most interesting. I'm sure there's a few others I've missed though.
Oh, I think there's a good list, and luckily we've got a couple of fans of a few of these pods, a few of these teams coming on the show to talk about them.
This is unrelated, but it's good to be able to talk to someone who knows their stuff for a change. What you mentioned?
Right here.
You mentioned the Port Adelaide ruck mix. Talk to me about Jordan Sweet. What are your thoughts there?
I don't know. I did like, I think it was Louis' point on the pod a day or so ago about the fact that they're already quite a tool side.
Yeah, I did listen to that, yeah.
Yeah, if that would suggest that they're probably only going to go with the one ruck. So if it is Sweet, then you're probably worrying about Soldo taking your spot if he has a bad game. If it is Soldo, then you're obviously not picking Sweet. So
would you pick him at R3, you reckon, if he had that solo ruck spot, or would that be a bit too...
Yeah, so we discussed this on our first pod of the year a couple of weeks ago, and I was initially quite against it, but since thinking about it with having Gawn and Grundy in the team, it does give you a nice option there to make sure you've got an extra player for that round. So I don't mind it, but it would make me nervous if he's solo and you've got Ivan Soldo sitting on the sidelines
and
waiting to get in.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is obviously like we want him to be there to cover rounds 5 and round 6, but if they are going solo and you've got a player like
Solo or Soldo?
Both. And is he going to be there? Like he's going to be there for round 6, and you've invested all this money for him to cover, and he's not even there like that. I could see a scenario where that happens.
The reason why I wasn't keen on it initially is just because of the price, like the 380k. You're still primarily picking him as a cash champ player.
Yeah.
So to me, it says, well, if you're going to spend 380k on your bench, he really needs to make more than 180k. Otherwise, you may as well just go on a 200k ruck.
Yeah. It's true.
100%.
Yeah, it's what you.
It's definitely something that I'll be considering as well. And maybe that does affect whether I do go the Grundy or Gorn if I go a Cherry in there, just so I don't have to worry about it quite as much. All right, let's move on to the last segment here. We've got a couple of rapid fire questions coming your way, so don't think about it too much. Just go, channel your inner Nathan, just jump in there and
we had to.
I've closed off that part of me.
Probably a wise move. We probably should have put Bales on the clock. I think Bales took some liberties. We said rapid fire questions, and he's given it the arm.
All right. So first thing that comes to your head, rapid fire questions. Let's go. First question: predict the highest averaging player for 2024.
Jordan Dawson.
Nice. I like that one. Okay. Biggest improvement from last season, points wise.
Oh. George Wardlaw.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, who's going to win the premiership?
Can't say Eagles.
Carlton.
Oh, it's 2 for 2 for Carlton.
Yeah, that actually is.
Yeah.
That pains me being a Richmond supporter. But.
Yeah.
Okay, wooden spoon prediction. You can say Eagles.
Not West Coast.
Yeah, nice. I like that. Just go with the field. Back the field.
Not West Coast. Would you rather win another hat or your team win another premiership?
Ooh.
Another hat.
Oh, I like it. Honesty.
That's
Premiership's
good.
a fair way off at the moment.
Just go for the realistic one. Tomato sauce, fridge or cupboard?
In Australia, it's got to be in the fridge.
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely the
Great
right
call.
answer. Toilet paper, over or under?
Definitely over.
Nice. I don't know if anyone says under, I might have to stop the recording. I'm not sure about it. Who wins the Content Creators Cup in 2024?
Me.
Oh, I love it. Back yourself in. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Definitely not. Horrible.
Absolutely.
Horrible idea.
Back you in there.
And the last one to get you thinking, does a straw have 2 holes or 1?
1.
Yeah.
Oh, you said the one. I'm still backing it too.
Hear my
continuous
logic. That's it. Hear my logic, DC. I said to Mitch last time, I said, if I was going to tunnel out of prison, how many holes would I dig?
If I close,
One hole,
one of the holes, do I still have 1 hole?
Huh?
Yes. So then I must have had 2 to start with, right?
One
Just
hole.
close one end of the hole.
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
Yeah,
Still the same hole.
I think you're on the money there.
Well,
and decisive too, which
decisive.
I
Yeah,
like.
they're
It's
very,
good.
very, very decisive, and I love the backing yourself for the Content Creators Cup. Let us know, DC, what's happening over at Hat Chat, and do you have anything else that you want to plug, and where can everyone find all the great content that you put out over there?
Yeah, we're back into weekly podcast now. So usually the pod's out Monday night or Tuesday. A few more episodes obviously prior to the game starting up, and then we'll be going weekly all the way through to the end of the season. We'll probably start our Wednesday night live spaces again as well once we start getting some games. So that'll be maybe a month off. Anything else to plug? We've got the live show coming up in Adelaide for Gather Round.
Oh,
actually,
yes,
as well.
yes.
So,
You'll be there. Awesome.
yeah, so that's going to be April 5th, I believe, Friday, April 5th. There's going to be Jake and myself from Hat Chat, Louis and Doss from Pod Warney's going to be there, obviously, from the Traders, and then Hef and K's from the Keeper League. So
the all-star weekend over at our Gather Round for the Content Creators.
We stuffed ourselves up there. We didn't book quick enough, and we're going to be sitting in Brisbane, bloody wishing we were there. So.
Eggs on our face. But yeah, no, we'll definitely, if you are in Adelaide that weekend, definitely head along. I think that'll be good fun for fantasy enthusiasts. Thank you very much, DC, for jumping on the show for the first time. Make sure you guys do go and check out Hat Chat on all the podcast platforms, and follow DC on Twitter, and tune into their live spaces on the Wednesday nights when they do come out. Make sure, if you have enjoyed these podcasts, give this one a big old thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're edging closer to that 2,000 subscriber mark. We cracked the 1,700 just the other day. So let's get us to 2K. And until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Bye.